Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the fourth conversation dedicated to the artists selected to the 61st edition of the Faenza Prize. Today we have the pleasure to meet 5 artists of the category under 35, very young but with a great story in art and in ceramic, and we will soon meet them. I would like to thank everybody for the possibility of sharing their experience together with the public, with the audience, and thank for their support in organizing this meeting. We will start with Francesco Gardini, an artist, Italian artist based in the beautiful traditional ceramic town of Nove. And he is young, very young. He was born in 1986, but he has a great story in art and ceramic, and I give him the word.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share my work. So I want to start this conversation showing the first picture, that is this picture of the river Brenta. Symbolized for me my favorite medium and a strong link to my land. 400 years ago, the community of the small town of Nove, near Vicenza in Italy, extracted the clay from the water course, started a tradition that is now very consolidated. So now we start like a journey across the river, across this magical water. And in fact, the first exhibition is Circe. Circe is this witch of the Odyssey that Ulysses meets after a long journey across this dark water. And my idea is that we are trapped between the virtue and reality in a technological enchantment, like the spell cast by Circe transforms us into what we really are. So you can see the domestic environment represented by furnishing in white ceramic that remind immediately to us our tradition. We are not in presence of metaphor or symbol, but a common object consumed by a bulimic obsession as we appropriate of the image. Tablet and iPhone are our present-day technological prosthetics. They amplify our perception of reality with a lot of information and possibility. Next. 300 plates are the center of this world convivio, banquet, where Circe delights to cast, to change her guests in various animals. Here is a remain of the banquet that is randomly set on the table and is living like a mutation, a decadent fascination. Everything is abandoned to a viral and virtual mutation, symbol of the overproduction of our time, connected to the growth of technologies and social crises that this modernity brings to us. So with this work, I want to talk about the overproduction that hits in a ceramic town like Nove, where I have my studio. Next. The white plate incanto, enchantment, hanging on the wall, does not really have any decoration, as you can see, but virtual ever-changing combination that the user composes with colorful flowers and butterfly, visible through the tablet with an app that I made for exhibition. Now it's very normal, if you think, with all devices to play with augmented reality, but think about to do this 10 years ago and connected to ceramic. So I think it was something really new to combine tradition and technology. So it's an ironic consideration how dated the classical decoration of ceramic work can be in relation of the possibility of the technological progress and create this balance between two ambiguous reality, the virtual and the real. The next river, so I can call like this, is Styx of the Divina Commedia. I always use this metaphor for my solo exhibition. And the first room is the Manufatti Fossili artifacts. In this room, these are full masses, all plaster molds from different Nove factory, agglomerate into form, stack, and then slices, as you can do with marble. I wanted to transform what remains into an archaeological artifact, like fossil traces found across the river. Next. Here I started completely to abandon ceramic as a medium in order to welcome pure sculptural forms. Next. As you can see here, everything is sliced. As you see this know-how how to do the plaster mold like Foxil. So next, please. Vision become more intimate. Every artwork has anthropomorphic characteristics. Pink chrome is a reminder of flesh. The drapery on the table, as you can see, seems really human skin. Like human remains, the whole body of work project a scenery ghostly presences, desolating space, and emanating the shadow of a distant past. As you can see, so I really love and start to talk about memory and tradition. And here I want to talk about that we are losing the know-how of my town, Nove, because old generation doesn't want to pass tradition and technique to young in just free. So it's a way to talk about that of, I think, our social crisis or losing something that is really important for us. The next is Next Riva. This is the tale of the porcelain skin, of this kind of drapery. So very complicated to do. Next river is Lete. Lete is another river of Dante. It's connected to memory. In fact, you can see in this picture, the first installation, the memories room, is a floor installation representing Lete, a water course of memories, composed by several 3D printed porcelain tubular segments, a technology that simulated the flow of thought. If you think that 3D doing this movement can be continuous, so my idea is to compare this movement with the idea of the flow of thought that is something of infinite. And then you have this interruption with this form that are heaps of porcelain powder, stoneware shapes, enamel, feldspar mixed with manganese, graphite, so very alchemical. And everything emphasizes this magmatic, chaotic materialization of thought in this flow of thought. Next, please. Each element finds its influence in archival old object and personal effect, traditional decoration, and all images of my unconscious. The porcelain dust, which appears fragment, in fact, is perfectly stable and still, suggesting we can only be partially aware of reminiscence and thought. So, yeah, as you can see, it's very alchemical reaction, but is integrating the idea of memory and the flow of thought. Next. The first section is completed by a large print on white cardboard, the imaginary garden of Paradisaide. The celestial landscapes originating from the abstraction of the photographic serie shoot between the 70s and the 80s at the Ceramic Museum in Nove. I had obtained and transformed these images to create my kind of paradise, my Eden. Next. The Paradisaide are composed, next please, so we can see the form. So the idea, as you can see of this picture, the Paradisaide are composed of Plotondis section, reminiscent of the movement of the classic pottery displayed in the museum. If you think like the plates of the museum are not just flat on the wall, but the age of the dishes create like a movement. The famous big mirror with ceramic profile have this wood structure at the back. So I just recreated this set of a museum in my way. And they have like an architectural present. They create the illusion of a different space-time dimension. And I want to talk about one thing with this picture. I created this installation in a normal room just before the first lockdown. So it's a funny way that I create like this landscape with technology, but it's something that everybody, I think, try during this period. We use a device, we are close at home, and use the device just to escape. So it's something really connected to what we had to pass during this period of COVID. So it's something that is connection about this possibility to escape from reality with the virtual technology, but always connected to who we really are with our tradition. Next, please. So the last room is the show ends with the return home, where home stands for the actual world waiting for us after this imaginative journey. Next, please. The works have, you will see familiar shapes, such as ball and daisies. The maiolic are displayed as in the shop window in Nove, and literally covered by dust. To the touch of the dust is surprisingly unstable, and you notice the passage of my fingers, a gesture that is really ironic, if you think, but is a delicate interaction with the past. Is a touch on the surface of time. I think after different years that I work with ceramic, at the beginning, a lot of artists, me too, for example, love to transform, create, destroy the ceramic, build it again, everything. But after years and years, I really love tradition and I really create inside me a big respect for ceramic. So this idea just to touch the ceramic is really, I think, romantic as a form of full respect for this material, because what will remain of my work? I think just a touch. So this is a way to talk about me in this present, how I can be, my interaction with the past of this material. Next, we arrived to my work selected for this Premio Faenza, Isola dei Beati, Island of Blessed. Everything started in the museum, so I'm happy that we can come back in museum. The museum is Palazzo Stormo in Bassano del Grappa, and you can see on these dishes and little tea cup is a Cozzi, it's a little frame of the Cozzi collection. Next, please. I started from this drawing on the cup and become a scene of a landscape, free from physical dimension, born from a long process of virtual abstraction, making an illusion of new space-time dimension. So I created like an ideal territory with a beautiful landscape and climate, a place where soul can find rest. This is the description of Camp Elisi, Elysian field, were defined. Here imagine a suspended in surface of thin and very seductive ceramic. So this representation started, like I said before, from a simple cup of a collection Cozzi, becomes here a vision really of beauty. And the technology is something really new in ceramic that never happened before, is an ink print, but is technological, but at the same time it's very traditional because it's glaze transported from a virtual process to ceramic. And you can see these organic things on the bottom part is the soul of this Camp Elisi that manifests itself through the fluid ceramic form, creating a circularity between materialization, dematerialization, the visible and the invisible. And I'm very happy to introduce not only my vision of this kind of landscape, but something very connected to the, if you can come back just a second to the pic before, to this extrusion that represent for me the soul, that is very connection to the tradition of my town, Nove, and of course of Alessio Tasca extrusion, a very important artist that passed away some years ago. So I like this connection of modern idea and some technology that are very important for my land. Next step is archetipo, and I want to share this last chapter from my presentation with something that I did during the first lockdown. Was very hard to me because I can't go to the studio. I just come back 2 months. And I had the opportunity to return the pleasure of reflecting on form and things dear to me. I must slow down like everybody. And I come back to making pottery in its essential. I fished out distant images in my mind, but carry them to my near aesthetics. The technique, as you can see in the picture, are very essential. My fingers are visible in all the surface of the vase. And the color is very particular. I created it with ceramica Gatti. Ciao Davide, saluto. Finishing with this leather opacity, particularly really even to the touch. Next, please. And I call it this serious archetype. So it means for me to come back to something that I need from the beginning, something not pure, because I think we have to we start to think about our works and what means do art with ceramic. So COVID maybe is a beginning about this new process. So I want to thank you for this opportunity of sharing. Grazie, Claudia.
Okay, thank you very much, Francesco. I really appreciate this contact between the idea of memory, history, tradition, but at the same time, it is a very contemporary work, and with many technological devices. And so it's thank you also for sharing with us the new works that you are preparing and that you prepared during the COVID lockdown.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your presentation. And now we pass to Michela Benedan, an Italian artist who is living in Germany. And she is a young artist, born in Italy, as I told you, in 1988. And she will explain us her work and her path in her artistic way. Okay?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I will start to speak from some recent works. This is not yet. I started to build some years ago these structures, and what I'm interested in is especially the firing process, because I build them straight, and then they through the heat they formate, and they changed quite a lot the shapes. And this process, I'm very interested in processes and experimenting, and this process allows me to create a kind of suspended moment or frozen moment with the shape. And yeah, somehow I like to provoke this deformation and transformation, and to play with probability and chance, and try to figure out how it will look after firing. And you can see in the next pictures how it looked like before firing and after firing. So it changed quite a lot. It shapes, and yeah, it's just play between chance and control somehow. But then the next picture, these are the very first works I did with ceramic in 2014, as I started my study. And yeah, the pieces are thrown on the wheel and then piled up and cut. And I like the idea of seeing through the vessels, and somehow it's an anatomy of the vessel. And yeah, I like to create some kind of graphical sculpture. Yeah, it's about somehow piling up material or accumulating, then reducing and taking away material. And also, yeah, again, there is this kind of deformation when the pieces are wet and soft. And next picture, please. This is filters. It's again the idea of crystallizing something, a bit like the recent works through the firing process. In this case, it's the glaze, which crystallizes because it's melting in the kiln, and by cooling up, it freeze. And I like the idea to catch or freeze a process or a moment. Yeah, so next, please. Yeah, I will not describe every work. We can go to the next because there is Chime. This was the this was the beginning of these structures. I started with this technique with paper clay or paper porcelain in this case, and I like the idea to create different objects that are somehow connected through this glaze. And it's also a bit about incompleteness, and these broken shapes are or open shapes. Then the next, Stutzen, it's I continue with the structures and along some years, but I think every work is quite, it's for me a really new chapter or something different, even if it's formally they are formally quite similar, or the way they are built up, it's similar. But here I was interested in this contrast between something light and something fragile, and the massive shapes of kaolin that are on the top. And it's something that I notice also while building up the pieces. They are really fragile when they are not fired, and I have to build them on a plate and to move them just with this plate. And after firing, they get very resistant, especially porcelain. It's really dense and stable. And I like somehow the idea to create a paradox, oxymoron. We can go to the next. And again, the next. And the next one. This was the very first, or one of the first works I did with this firing process to try to, or I did it more consciously and intentionally than before, because at the beginning it happened really by chance, and then I decided to use this chance or mistake to create this suspended moment. And in this piece, I wanted to try to control a bit this process, and I fired them on an inclined surface so that the movement get a direction, and so that I can somehow decide how I will deform in the kiln. Next picture, please. This is also about, it's the same technique, about during the firing process it deformated. Next, please. Here it was more the idea of an image, or also this imprint. I wanted to create an idea of limit with this piece. And so this is the piece selected for the Faenza prize.
Yes.
And Gap, it's the title says I read something. It's similar to the very first works I did, sections, because the way it's built, it's very similar. I throw the pieces on the wood and pile them up, and then deformate, and then deformate them with this shape and the inside, and then cut them through. And it was for me, it's again this anatomic side, but also this negative space, or I wanted to create at some level imprint or trace, the idea of an object that it's it creates a shape, but it's taken away. And for me, it's this idea of imprint, not so much an idea of something that is missing, but more an idea of possibility. And also, I consider imprint as a process, and as also something that left its shape, but also deformate the piece. And there are some levels. There's this sphere on the inside, then the cut of the vessel, and then the space between the two pieces. So at many levels, and an idea of gap and of space. I like somehow to try always something new, and a bit to push the limit of the material and experiment. So it's quite intuitive way of working, and also
yes, you have this approach very technical to ceramic, and I really like this idea of studying and researching on the fragility of the material, but at the same time using the idea of the fragment as a symbol of your work. And this idea also of taking the instant of things, of structure, of forms, and it's like if you stop the moment and the ceramic is appearing. And also this idea of escaping the inside of the material in this work you presented for the Faenza Prize. I really like these layers that are putting and are constructed in a kind of negative positive, and it's a very interesting work. So thank you, Michela, for your presentation, and let's go on with Giulia Bonora, an Italian artist born in 1986. She comes from our region, Emilia-Romagna, and she's presenting her work, her history in ceramic art, but not in sculpture, let's say. And she will explain us also the use of blue, which is the main impressive color that arises from her work. So the voice to you.
Thank you, Claudia. Hello, everybody. First, I would like to thank the MIC Museum and all the jury of Faenza's Prize for this possibility to present my work here. My name is Giulia Bonora, and I live and work in Bologna, where I studied sculpture at the Fine Art Academy. I graduated in 2012 with a dissertation focused on the relationship between art and alimentary, and precisely I invented a research method called cucina scultoria, a mixed process between sculpture and cooking, and I started to work with ceramic when I was at university, as well as drawing, performance, and installation. I made this tagliatella cake sculpture during my art research at the AKI, the Art University in Enschede, in Netherlands. And in AKI, I began to work with ceramic and food mixing together. The act of cooking was simulated in my studio using the cooking techniques, but with sculpture material, so mixing together in the same piece. Next. In 2015, I was invited by MLB Home Gallery in Ferrara for a special project connected to Milan Expo. The project for a dinner is called Co-Dinners, and it is a food performance. The Co-Dinners meal project was founded with the aim of creating within a dinner and accentuating a dynamic relationship in sharing dishes and in communication among participants. In fact, the plates were linked differently at each meal with different connection. The material for the connection is a homemade elastic string, and the complete table service is white terracotta. In these pictures that you can see, people are sat in front of each other, linked in this way. One person at the spoon of the person seated in front of them. In my point of view, it was possible to create a mind map connection of the participants on the table, thanks to the play of the table service. And for that occasion, I also had a big help from the chef Pierluigi Di Diego. Next picture. In the same year, in 2015, I did also a food project for Galleria Più in Bologna. The project called Plaster as Floor is an investigation into sculpture and design about food, starting with the development of artistic process as a research method. The exhibition was made by 8 live streaming appointments from my workplace to the gallery. The live program was seen by the onlookers at the gallery. During the streaming, I was able to communicate and receive questions by the audience. Now I can say that it was a kind of anticipation of what people meet nowadays with Zoom and Meet. And during the live streaming, I was cooking Italian recipe with alternative materials, showing the real process of making art and producing personal interpretation of the food. In these pictures particularly is visible the installation at the gallery. There was a table with some ceramic sculptures representative of the three main dishes. As you can see, there is the TV with the seat around it where my live streaming could be watched. In the next picture, you can see the 3 ceramic sculptures I did for the installation at the gallery. Minestra con verdure, torta di tagliatelle e spiedino alla zingara are the names of these 3 works. The sculptures were inspired by a cookbook of the 70s, and I did it in ceramic, recording the process with a camera and producing a video of the making of it. Next pictures. In 2017 and 18, I went as an artist resident at the European Ceramic World Center in Netherlands, and it was the biggest experience I did in my career. I went there thanks to the Dutch funds, and I stayed there for 3 months, split into different periods. And I had a big studio, and I could use all the facilities and finally learn about glaze recipe and the colors for ceramic. Next pictures. During my stay at the KVC, I developed several projects. I began to create containers using the ancient technique of colombino, extruded pipes for creating abstract installation, and table models in small scales, prototypes for food performance. Particularly in this picture, you can see the project for a table, my studio, and a small vase. In my idea, if a table was transformed into a sort of container, the perception of food could change. And in this way, I wanted to break cultural rules that silently are adopted by the community. Next pictures. In this case, there are a total of 5 model tables in this series of work. This work is called Falling the Empty. And the table we can see here is designed to let food fall on the floor. And the tabletop is made of porcelain, and the legs are colored metal. In the next pictures, this table is named Table with Lianas. In this case, the tabletop has tubes below, and the idea is and the idea of the performance is for the audience to find food inside the tubes. In this case, the sculpture is made of stoneware and the legs are solid. Next picture. In this work, there is another kind of experimentations, and in this case, I just work with extruded pipes. These sculptural lines are attempt to create an union between sketch drawings and ceramic matter. I use a different kind of blue. In this case, I use blue matte glaze. Next pictures. In 2019, I did an artist residence at the Carlo Zauli Museum after winning the Resident Prize Open to Art organized by Officine Saffi. I work on the concept of reserve using coil building techniques to create pottery in shapes and forms comparable to ancient Greek amphora containers. The material is stoneware, and the glaze is made by an experimental recipe made after dozens of tests. For me, glaze color is one of the most important parts of making ceramic. I try until I find the right tone of blue. I feel like an alchemist when I try my colors. Next pictures. During my second period, the KVC, in 2018, I began to think about this question. Eating is natural or unnatural? With these pictures, I wanted to show you the initial sketches of my sculptures, because I always had the idea to use this in a final performing event, but I never did. Next picture. This series is called Feed Your Head because it symbolizes the value of nourishing the mind as well as the body, and include 3 sculptures and 1 installation. I use the color blue since it's the only color which does not exist in edible nature naturally. It represents the consciousness, for example, sky color, and the unconscious, sea color. Blue is a symbol of belonging and represents the material bond. This is the installation made by sturdy pipes and laid down on the floor. Next. This is one of the piece of the group. I combine mechanic. In this case, I use only handmade Colombino. The glaze is centered in gob, and the shade of the color gives the perception of movement to the volume. When I did this series pieces, I followed the process of making day by day, building the form as a homemade 3D printer machine. What I like most of the technique is the loop in which your mind goes and keep a kind of deep meditation. Next pictures. This is another sculptures of the group Feed Your Head, and in this case I use Colombino and extruded technique. And lastly, finally, next pictures. So this piece is the final piece which entered for the 61st Faenza Prize. The name is Feed Your Head. It is another shapes, more long on the floor, but with the same concept. It's a kind of container created for a future performance. It was produced at the KVC, and the glaze is a center in gold. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Giulia. It's for your presentation. It is very interesting, this starting point on food, and that is which is an important part of our life, especially for an Italian artist and an Italian girl. And you arrive to use clay to feed your head and your mind. So there is this beautiful connection, and it's very, very, very interesting. And I really appreciate the fact that you explain this huge use of blue, which is for you very important, like a philosophical pattern of your work. So thank you very much. And we talk about KVC, and we will mention that the next meeting will be with Ranti Mityan next Thursday, and we say hello to him because he is online now. So next artist, we fly to Japan, and we will meet Yon Fukazawa, a very young Japanese artist, 1990. And he presented an extremely interesting work for the Faenza Prize, linked to the way of approaching clay in a matter of civilization. And I give him the word to express his work. Thank you, Yon.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Claudia. Could we start with the image first, please? Thank you. So this is the piece that I was nominated for the Faenza Award. But before I want to start talking about my work, I thought I should introduce myself first a bit. tell you guys a bit about my background, and also the kind of the Japanese approach to the material itself. So you might hear from my accent. I was brought up in Australia, so I've got an Australian accent. I've lived most of my life in Australia, maybe about 20 years or so. So I finished a design school in Sydney. And after that, I wanted to move into the ceramics industry, but Australia is quite famous for not having a lot of manufacturing. So there wasn't a ceramics industry I could move into myself. So I decided to start making tableware. And I made tableware for restaurants around in Sydney for about 4 years, and developed a brand, and it was going quite well. But just making tableware every day, I was getting good at it, but I wanted to do something more with the material, and I wanted to express myself a bit more, and do some more experimental processes. So towards the end of the 4th year, I started to decide to go back to Japan. It was also kind of like an identity issue as well, thinking that I should go back to Japan and learn a bit more about my culture, since I was also in Australia for such a long time. So next slide, please. So just the one, I guess, please. So yeah, the one in the middle. Yeah, so I moved to this town called Tajimi in Japan. It's one of the biggest ceramic manufacturing areas in Japan, and it's also famous for it's the host town for the Ceramic Mino Festival. And there's a school there, or institution there called Ishoken, and a lot of famous artists and ceramic artists have been graduated there from there. If you could go to the next slide. And these are two graduates there. The Kuwata Takuro is quite famous in Europe, and Akio Nizato has also won, I think, the Young Artist Award, the Faenza Award. There's a lot of Japanese artists from Ishoken that have actually won the Faenza Award, so I thought I might have mentioned that. And also, so I did a year of ceramics there, but now I'm working there, so that's why I'm promoting it a bit. So if anybody wants to come study in Japan, please come to Ishoken. Okay, and then the next slide, please. And so our director at the moment is Nakashima Harumi. So he's teaching the schools kind of under his guidance, and we have this thing called contemporary koge or koge. Very simply translating it into English would be like Japanese craft or artisanal craft. And this is kind of the field that Nakashima Harumi works in, and a lot of the Japanese artists and ceramic artists' approach is within this framework of koge or contemporary koge. Yeah, so it has what's the difference between the two, between like contemporary art and Japanese koge, is that in contemporary koge there's a very strong focus on the material itself. So in this case it is ceramics, and also we think the cultural context around the material is important, as well as the techniques and the tradition. So for instance, in Japanese ceramic culture, Japanese tea ceremony is associated quite heavily with it. So a lot of Japanese ceramic artists reference Japanese tea ceremony things as well. Let's just see contemporary art. Yeah, and then one of the other main things is with contemporary art, the thinking process is usually you think about the concept first and then you decide the process and the material. But with Koge, it's the material comes first, then the techniques, and then the kind of the thinking comes after that. Yeah, so that's probably one of the bigger differences. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just these few slides that I'm going to go through right now is part of the same a big body of work that I submitted for the Faenza Award. These pieces are much bigger. This is about 60 by 60 centimeters in size. And what I'm doing here is I'm playing around with the process of throwing. So all these, you can go through the next slide as well, just to have an image of the other kind of works that I'm doing. So this is the body of series of work where I'm throwing on the wheel, and as I'm throwing the wheel, I'm looking at how the clay warps and cracks, and I'm using that to see how I can make the clay look more interesting and show the properties of the clay in a more clayey form or a more materialistic way. And then so like whilst I'm doing that, I'm controlling the clay. So traditionally, if you're good at throwing, you're good at controlling the clay to a very sharp extent. But what I'm doing here is I'm letting the clay do what the clay wants to do. And that's where I can show the more stronger characteristics of the clay itself. And then during this process, what I'm doing is I'm thinking about I'm thinking about this relationship between what is artificial and natural at the same time. Yeah, and if you could just slide through the other foot is there. So, and this is still the same series. Is there another one down? So that's a whole bunch of the same series. So that's about it, I guess. Yeah, there's a few more slides. That's just closer image to it.
Thank you, Yon, for your presentation. And thank you for being online, because I know that in Japan is too late.
Yeah, it's pretty late over here. Yeah.
I really like your story, starting from the industrial part of ceramic, arriving to sculpture. And it's good that you mentioned Ishoken, which is one of the most important ceramic school, let's say, center of studying and research in Japan. And I have the pleasure to meet Arumi in Faenza for Ceramic Now, and to visit Ishoken, which is a very, very special place. And yes, I really like this, the fact that you talk about this contemporary Koge. And you arrive in this in your story to use the in my opinion, of course, the iconic form of the vase, and to express the idea of clay and ceramic as a part of a big story of culture and civilization. And in my opinion, it's a very interesting philosophy that, because many artists are arriving to this idea of returning to the very rough clay, not using glazes, but just the firing and the power of art and clay. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And unfortunately, we don't have online Sophia Aguilera, but she sent us a message for her presentation. and I will ask Stefania to put online this.
Ciao a tutti. My name is Sophia Aguilera, and I'm a Spanish artist based in Barcelona. I was born in London, UK, hence the British accent. But I grew up in a small town in the south of Spain, and then I moved to Barcelona to study art. And I never set out to pursue a career in clay. In fact, I trained to be a set designer. And after graduating, I worked in a number of shows as a prop and costume assistant. So this is something that I think in retrospect has influenced my work. I developed a love for storytelling through objects and an interest in the relationship between reality and appearance. Theatre, in a sense, it's recreating an illusion of reality. And I find that these are concepts that keep coming up in my work. I would say that my practice is rooted in tradition and in craftsmanship. I'm deeply influenced by all that, sort of rich and indulgent Baroque ornamentation you would find in 18th and 19th century ceramics. And I try and apply those traditional ceramic techniques to my sculpting processes. My recent body of work is focused on exploring and reviewing the classical still life genre, and I find inspiration in trompe-l'oeil paintings and traditional ceramic plates and objects that trick the eye. So what I do is I sculpt and assemble objects in order to create scenes or, sort of visual puns. And then what I do is I introduce little contemporary gestures or surprises to create duality or a visual discordance, and with the intention of inviting the viewer to consider new ways of interpreting classical imagery and aesthetics. I find beauty in the mundane and the ordinary. I enjoy that tension of what you would consider beauty or not, There's also a sense of nostalgia of the past in my work, I think. So the sculpture that was selected for Faenza, it's titled Still Life with Flowers, and it's an installation piece where I present a very ornate and elaborate and classical flower vase on this very mediocre pedestal that are in fact assembled plastic stools cast in clay. So I'm trying to address a number of concepts such as domesticity and class and sort of cultural heritage. In a sense, it's an absurd visual pun that reflects on that blurry space between arts and craft and the mass-produced. Yeah, and I try to point out the beauty in these everyday objects and the mundane and the ordinary. So yeah, I'd like to end just apologising that I couldn't be live with you. And yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to the Faenza Ceramic Museum, with a special mention to Claudia Casali and all the prize committee for organising these talks. I know it's been a difficult year for everybody, and yeah, let's hope that we can, get together soon after, this health crisis ends, hopefully. And yeah, thank you. Gracias. a todos. Y chao.
Okay, we will show some images of the work by Sophia Aguilera. This is the one she presented for the Faenza Prize, selected. But as you probably understood from her speech, and most of you, I think, know the works of Sophia, she is working between the idea of reality and appearance, on the thematic of tradition, myth, and the costume, and she is always exploring the thematic of the classical still life that we know it is a part of all the matter of art history, but in a contemporary way, expressing our reality, our quotidianity. And what I can say, she is trying to express the beauty of the ordinary life. So we can see some images of previous work and actual works that she is making and producing in Spain, because she is working in Barcelona, even if she was born in London. And now she is based in Spain. So these are some of the images of her work. So we have many comments on. We finish our presentation with these works of Sophia. Okay, and I'd like to join all the other artists because I'd like to tell them that there are positive comments on your works, of course, and there is a special question for Francesco about the printing. The printing you are using for your ceramics. Can you say something?
Yeah, it's a new technology that I found I developed in the last 2 years, and it's a particular inkjet process on a glazed, very thin surface. Usually, this technology is used in very different industrial process, but I bring into ceramic art. Trying to transport my illustration with different programs from the computer to the ceramic surface, and then everything is put on the kiln again, and cooked around 700-800 degrees. So it's a very traditional way to work, but it's very interesting that the ink transport the surface of glaze is like powder, and it's very, very precise. So it's very interesting to work in this way. So it's something very different from common glazes or decay or different photoceramic develop. Is something new. I think it is quite interesting. Of course, the photo is a little bit flat, but if you see live, you have the white reflection of classic Maiolica in contrast with my color that are semi-shiny of this kind of landscape that I draw. So it is quite interesting way to see a new escape with ceramic.
Thank you, Francesco. There is a question for Yon. Do you use a special kiln for firing your sculpture?
Actually, I just use a gas kiln in reduction, but what I do is to get more randomness around the form, I make the vase or the form itself into like a saga. I think that's what it's called. So I fill it up with clay and then put organic material in and leave some places open so it smokes around a bit as well. Okay, so it's not a special kiln, it's just a unique firing style.
Yeah, for arriving to this structure of the surface. Okay.
Yeah.
And for Michela, do you use porcelain or white earthenware for your sculpture?
The structures are, the first one are with porcelain. So
Porcelain.
paper porcelain. It's a mesh of porcelain and paper, because paper makes it more stable. It allows to construct very fragile structures. But the last one from 2020 was stoneware, also paper.
Ah, okay, stoneware.
It's it changed a bit, but mostly it was porcelain.
Okay, thank you very much. And for Giulia, this beautiful blue is a special pigment that you studied on, as you said, and it is. Do you have a kind of copyright on it, or is a glaze that it is easily and common use?
In my case, I like to produce a special recipe. That's what I learned during the Casali residence, and I'm still working on that way of working of making recipes for ceramics. So I do glaze with specific ingredients, and all the time when I want to produce one special tone, I just do a lot of tests. And generally, what I like most is the Egyptian blue. So it's a special glaze that you fire at low temperature, but it's really similar to the color of a swimming pool. And yeah, it's my preferred ones.
Yes, I always, when I saw your works, when I see your works, I think always of a blue clay. In reality. So it's something special. So we don't have any other questions. So thank you very much for staying with us. And I'd like to present you next conversation, which will be next week with Ranti Tian. We already talked about him, about EKVC. He is the director of this important center in the Netherlands, and he will have the conversation with Natasha Allers, Julia Immelmann, Noor Ardiasha, JP Rakava-Merisse, and Yu Tanaka. So a very important new group of under 35. And let's stay tuned and see you next week. And thank you very much for staying with us. So, ciao.
Thank you, grazie. Ciao a tutti.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Grazie.
Grazie.